At least 5 shots fired at close range hit Dorfman in the back left side of the head. 8 shell casings were found. His companion, Irwin Weiner, walking just ahead of him, was not touched.
It's totally full. I got to have a conversation with him.
At least 4 people saw Allen Dorfman gunned down in the hotel parking lot in Lincolnwood. This is how they remember the gunman. 6 feet 2 inches tall, weighing perhaps 240 to 260 pounds, 36 to 40 years old. He had a full beard. And there was a second man, younger, perhaps 30, and shorter, under 6 feet. He was of average build. They apparently waited until Dorfman had parked his Cadillac in the Hyatt parking lot and began walking with a companion, Irwin Weiner, to the hotel restaurant, 100 feet or more away. As Dorfman passed between 2 parked cars, the killers came up from behind.
They shouted this as a robbery at first, but then they started shooting before the victim had a chance to do anything. I wouldn't hazard a guess. I don't think robbery was the motive.
At least 5 shots fired at close range hit Dorfman in the back left side of the head. 8 shell casings were found. His companion, Irwin Weiner, walking just ahead of him, was not touched.
Weiner just stood there, apparently.
He didn't dive for cover or...
As far as we can determine at this time, he stood there.
Weiner, a retired bondsman from Niles, was a longtime friend. The two had been indicted together back in 1974 in connection with a Teamsters Union fraud scheme. Both men were linked with the mob.
It's a part and parcel of life in the United States that close association with La Cosa Nostra often leads to a sudden death, the type of death that we experience today.
This morning, Dorfman and Weiner went to the First National Bank of Lincolnwood. Weiner gave him a check for $7,500, he said, for a past debt. And then the 2 men went for a bite to eat at the Hyatt restaurant. After the shooting, Dorfman's wife and Bill Webb, a business partner, came to the Skokie Valley Hospital to identify the body. Webb was a reluctant witness for the government in the recent bribery trial that ended in the conviction of Dorfman, Teamsters boss Roy Williams, and 3 others. On the back seat of Dorfman's car was a video cassette of the new Paul Newman movie, The Verdict. Dorfman himself was awaiting sentencing in federal court, but apparently someone already had passed sentence on Allen Dorfman. John Drummond has more on the murdered mob associate.
Allen Dorfman always traveled in the fast track. Immaculately dressed and with a perpetual tan, Dorfman appeared on the surface, at least, to be the epitome of success. AD, as his friends called him, was on a first-name basis with powerful politicians, union bigwigs, and Hollywood stars. But he was also close to organized crime figures, and that may have been his undoing. Through the years, Dorfman, who turned 60 earlier this month, amassed a fortune. He controlled the Amalgamated Insurance Agency of Chicago, which processed insurance claims for Teamsters Union members. Partly through Amalgamated, Dorfman had a grip on Teamster pension fund loans, land transactions, as well as major insurance deals. But despite his jet-set lifestyle, Dorfman had his brushes with the law. He served 9 months in prison in the early 1970s for accepting a $55,000 kickback on a pension fund loan. In another case, in 1975, he was tried on a fraud charge, but he was acquitted after a lengthy trial at the Dirksen Federal Building. But recently, the roof caved in on Dorfman. Last month, he, along with Teamsters head Roy Williams and 3 other men, were convicted on bribery conspiracy charges. He was scheduled to be sentenced on February 10th and faced a lengthy jail term. He was also scheduled to go on trial later this year in a case involving the late Robert Kendler, a developer and nationally known handball player. The government claimed that Dorfman and reputed crime syndicate figure Joey the Clown Lombardo conspired to extort $800,000 from Kendler. Kendler's expensive Lake Forest home was bombed, and officials contended that Dorfman and Lombardo were behind the bombing incident. Adding to Dorfman's woes, an indictment in San Francisco last week on charges of attempting to loot the funds of a labor union there. And another blow. Attempts by the Labor Department to freeze the assets of Dorfman's companies and place them in the hands of a receiver. As Dorfman's world collapsed around him, underworld elements may have felt that Dorfman might cooperate with the feds in an effort to avoid jail.
I want it to be very clear. Mr. Dorfman at no time cooperated in the past or currently with the FBI or the Justice Department, and therefore I want it very clear that his death, whatever happened today, was not the result of his cooperation because he was not cooperating.
This week marks 40 years since one of the most brazen, unsolved murders in Chicago history. An insurance salesman with close ties to the Chicago mob gunned down outside a Lincolnwood hotel in broad daylight.
Insiders say organized crime feared he might rat out mob higher-ups after being convicted himself. CBS 2's Chris Ty takes a closer look at the still unanswered questions and the murder of Allen Dorfman.
Despite his jet-set lifestyle, Dorfman had his brushes with the law.
That video is of freshly convicted insurance executive Allen Dorfman.
In 1975,
that voice is of former CBS 2 crime reporter John Bulldog Drummond.
In my opinion, it's other than the fact of the Sam G. and Connor murder in 1975, it probably is the biggest mystery of any organized crime hit we've had in Chicago.
Walking through the Dirksen Federal Building in 1982, Allen Dorfman was between criminal cases. He and two prominent mob figures were freshly convicted of funneling Teamsters pension money to mob casinos in Vegas. And he was days away from heading to San Francisco on another case. And it's believed he had deep mob secrets.
Now, you was concerned that this guy was going to spill his beans. Allen, at 60 years of age, can't take hard time anymore. He's not going to be put away for as much as 20 years. He's going to talk. So we've got to do something about it.
Out on bond, Dorfman was having lunch with a friend at the old Purple Hotel that used to stand here in Lincolnwood. Drummond says someone tipped off the mafia that day 40 years ago this Friday.
They had to get rid of Dorfman. They had to take the risks of doing the hit in public like that because they normally would have never done that. But they had to get him while they could before he went to California and start spilling the beans.
The clock was ticking.
Yes, it was. They had to hit him and do it soon.
Sandwiched between two cars, one of them his, with a copy of the Paul Newman movie The Verdict in the back seat, he was taken out.
Gunned down, 7 shots to the head in broad daylight at noontime when people were frequenting the hotel was almost unprecedented.
When Dorfman walked the Dirksen halls as his professional world crumbled, he couldn't know the end was near. 40 years later, the veteran Drummond wouldn't have believed back then that the murder of the insurance executive with mafia ties would still be unsolved.
And it's still the mystery today as it was back in 1983 in that cold January day when they put 7 slugs into Mr. Dorfman's head with it. The fact they did it in broad daylight at a popular restaurant hotel and got away with it, it's never been cleared, and I thought by now it would have been.
In Lincolnwood, Chris Ty, CBS 2 News.